We're excited to have you join us for the Come Follow Me 2021 podcast and study of the Doctrine and Covenants, hosted by Rod Meldrum and Jonathan Neville, and presented by Gospel Doctrine Answers. In today's podcast, we will study Doctrine and Covenants 23 through 26, Strengthen the Church.
Welcome, everybody, to our podcast this week. I am so excited to have my dear friend, Godfrey. I got to tell you a little bit about how Kay and I met, and we're going to do that in just a second. But just for an introduction here, so this is lesson number 11, Doctrine and Covenants, sections 23 through 26. And today I have with me one of the foremost experts, I would say, in the church on church history, but also a real scholar on Emma. And section 25 this week is going to be talking a lot about Emma. Our understanding is that you've already gone through the lesson, and I've gone through all that. We don't go through the lesson. We basically do deep dives into certain aspects, or we'll pick a few of the verses in the scriptures that we're talking about this week, and then go into more depth and detail. So hopefully, this is a kind of the additional information. Yeah. So Kay, I got to tell you about where Kay and I. Many moons ago, had the opportunity to, I was noticing that a lot of people who do tours, specifically church history tours, also would do tours down to the quote-unquote Book of Mormon lands down in Central America. And I noticed that there was this one particular tour guide that he didn't have any tours booked into Central America for Book of Mormon tours. He just did book church history tours. And on a whim, one morning, I remember I really was, I felt like I should give him a call. So I called him up out of the blue, not knowing if he'd even be around. Maybe he's even on a tour, possibly. And got a hold of Kay on the phone. And you remember what I asked you there, Kay?
Yes, I do. Do you take tours to South Central America? And I do remember my response. I said something to the effect that if you're looking for someone that's going to place the Book of Mormon in South or Central America, you've got the wrong guy. And then I think I heard the phone drop and this kind of yell at the end of the phone.
I'm like, oh my word, that is that, because I didn't know anybody else that didn't do that. I mean, that was so amazing, and that was really the beginning of a long friendship. We've traveled all over the country together, and even across the world together.
We have.
I had the privilege and honor of going with Kay on. He's kind of, I don't know if he's most known, but he's very well known for his tours of Israel.
We did.
And Jerusalem and that whole area, and I spent about 2 weeks, I think it was, with you.
Wonderful trip.
On an amazing tour with Asher and stayed in Leonardo and that kind of stuff.
It was awesome.
But I tell you, it's one thing to go to these places, these sacred sites, and it's a whole other thing to go with someone who really knows the ins and outs, the back and forwards, and also can tell you the background information, so you know what you're looking at and why it's important. And that's why I love having Kay. Kay was kind enough to go with Wayne and I on some of our very first tours together.
Wonderful trips.
So we did traverse the length and breadth of the interior of America and all the way up to the Hill Cumorah.
We did.
Now Kay has been very busy. I call him an epic historian because not only is he epic from an EPIC, but he's also an epoch historian, meaning that he has basically spent a majority of your life actually studying the life and times of the prophet Joseph Smith.
Just Joseph.
Yeah.
Can't tell you much about Brigham Young, but I know he's a great friend of Joseph.
That's right. They were good friends together.
Yes,
and also Brigham Young endured quite a pretty amazing tongue lashing from Joseph a couple times.
Did. As did a number of other individuals.
So Kay is one of the foremost experts on Joseph Smith, and because of that, also I think he has a deep understanding of Emma and her role in this whole restoration, and some of the things that she accomplished and things. And anyway, but before we get into all of that, so I just want Kay to know how much I appreciate him taking the time out of his busy schedule. He's been on a mission back in Vermont, basically.
Sharon, Vermont.
Sharon, Vermont, and the birthplace and so forth of Joseph Smith. And tell us just really quickly about when did you go and when did you get back and what did you do there?
We've been back a little over a year. My wife and I just put our papers in like anyone else. They did ask for some information about us, and someone, I think, in the historical department kind of knew our background, because the next thing I know, we're being asked to serve as literally as historians there at the Joseph Smith Birthplace Memorial. And that 18 months we were there in Vermont was absolutely incredible.
Did you learn anything new while you were there?
A ton of stuff. A ton of stuff. I probably did more research there than I should have done. Let's just put it that way. But
it was a research mission.
We really did have a great experience, and it was wonderful, and did get involved in lots of other stuff that I never dreamed we would even touch or be remotely close to, and it was great. We loved it.
Well, that's fantastic. You had that opportunity, that experience, and we get to benefit from that here today. Yeah. So if you have your scriptures handy, let's go ahead and pull up section and verse 3 had something I wanted to just mention here. I was talking to Oliver Cowdery here. And he says, magnify thine office, and after thou hast sowed thy fields and secured them, go speedily unto the church which is in Colville, Fayette, Manchester. And I love how the Lord, he understands our needs, and he knows that we can't, run faster than we can, walk, kind of thing. Basically we have to be able to have all things in proper order. And I love the statement from Brigham Young one time that said that that it makes no. I'm not sure exactly how the statement goes, but essentially the gist of it is that it makes no sense to try to teach a man the gospel when he's starving.
Makes
so
sense.
You got to take care of those physical needs first, and of course back in those days, if you didn't get a crop, then you were actually likely to starve. I mean, you were going to be really hard pressed to do that. So he's basically telling Oliver Cowdery to take care of his physical needs, and then he will be strengthened to be able to accomplish the spiritual things that the Lord has set up for him.
Joseph Smith also received a similar admonition after he received back the golden plates and the Urim and Thummim, and was told, now as you proceed, pace yourself, get your crops in the ground, and the rest will come, but don't go any faster than you deem necessary. Yes.
Yeah.
Similar kind of thing.
I think that's kind of interesting when it comes down to our spiritual and physical preparedness. A lot of times, being in the last days and everything, that a lot of people go, well, you know what, I'm just going to prepare spiritually, and then the Lord will just kind of take care of our physical needs, if that time comes or whatever. And I'm kind of thinking it's
good luck.
Got it a little bit backwards. You need to take care of both your physical and your spiritual needs, and not neglect either one.
Yeah, very much.
And then verse 6, it says, and it shall be given thee in the moment what thou shalt speak and write. And I love this because I've actually had this happen to me so many different times, and I'm sure
I have too.
You have too. When you're in the service of the Lord, it's amazing how sometimes you just kind of hit a wall, and you're just like, or you lose your train of thought, and then have all of a sudden not only did the train of thought come back, but also on the correct track,
exactly.
And everything,
Exactly.
And the words just start to flow. And it's quite a humbling experience, actually, to have that happen.
My wife and I experienced that many, many times in the mission field, as we would be at the door greeting guests, and we had no idea their background. And a lot of them in Vermont that would visit this Joseph Smith birthplace site were not members of the church, from the area, knew of the site, never been there, and just come. And you just have to be in tune, and the Spirit just has to be able to tell you what to say, because you don't know what to say. And until you get into it and start to discuss stuff, do you find out, the Lord knew exactly what I needed to say to best benefit the family that had just arrived. So, you bet.
Yeah, in fact, that's a little something that's in my patriarchal blessing, actually.
Oh, really?
That this blessing would be something I would be. Yeah, I would be.
It's a great
gift to have. It is a great gift, especially if you're speaking to lots of people all over the place. And then let's jump over to verse 9. And in temporal labors thou shalt not have strength, for that is not thy calling. Attend to thy calling, and thou shalt have wherewith to magnify thine office, and to expound all scriptures, to continue in laying on of the hands and confirming the churches. This one I wanted to just make a couple of comments about, just because the temporal labors thou shalt not have strength, for that is not thy calling. Mm-hmm. So Oliver Cowdery's calling wasn't in temporal things; he was more on the spiritual side.
Right.
But I think it's interesting to note that all of us have different gifts, and all of us have been given different talents, and we don't all get the same talents and gifts, so that we can edify each other and bless each other's lives. You know stuff, and you have talents and gifts that I don't have, and I might be able to work on them and kind of become better at those particular things, but sometimes it just comes natural.
Right.
Right. And in fact, probably about a year or so ago, Elder Bednar was up at BYU, Idaho, at a big devotionals up there. And he said, anybody wants to have a question answered, just text the question. Well, of course, there's 30,000 questions that showed up on his phone. Sure. So one of them he chose to talk about was there's somebody said, how do I get all the gifts, basically? How do I go about living my life so I can get all of the gifts? And like it's some kind of okay, so somebody made a list of all the gifts and said, okay, my goal in my life is to achieve all of these different gifts, like a list.
I see.
Right, like a bucket list kind of thing. I want to be able to have this gift, and so forth, and I'll just keep working on each one of them until I have it, and then I'll have all the gifts. And Elder Bednar kind of looked up and he kind of goes, actually, you can't earn these gifts. You can't achieve them. He says they're gifts. Gifts are given freely.
Yeah.
And the reason why gifts are given is for you to be able to accomplish what the Lord has in mind for you to do. So you will only be given gifts as you need them to accomplish your life's mission.
And wouldn't you agree that finding out what gifts those may be, maybe turning to your patriarchal blessing, like you mentioned earlier, is certainly a way to start to determine what gifts you ought to be focusing on.
Exactly. And so that I think is so important, because we can't all have all gifts.
Yeah.
Although you're close, but
no, yes, right. I'm still trying to figure out the patriarchal blessing.
Yeah. When you get that figured out, then you're probably going to die. So.
Totally true.
But anyway, so I just wanted to bring that up. Find out what the gifts are that you have. Yeah. And then just drill deep on those gifts. Be the best you can in those particular areas, particular areas of expertise. All right, verse 15. For just a second, and in whatsoever place ye shall enter, and they shall receive you not in my name, ye shall leave a cursing instead of a blessing, by casting off the dust of your feet against them as a testimony, and cleansing your feet by the wayside. Now that is an interesting concept, and I remember in my mission talking about, I don't know, Elder, should we dust our feet off of these people? We never did.
Probably a good thing.
But cursings and blessings, we don't talk about that a lot nowadays, but there were actually some different areas in church history where there were real cursings. And I remember the first time you took us to that little town just outside of Far West, and
oh yeah.
Is it that? What is it called? It's called not Gatlinburg. It's
Gallatin.
Gallatin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like a scary ghost town. In fact, I'll try to get some pictures to Mike and have him put some couple of pictures. But this has to do with the Hans Mill massacre.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're talking. Oh yeah.
No, I'm talking about.
You're talking.
No,
that's
not
place.
Gallatin.
Well, that is a scary little place. Yeah. There's not much left of that dusty little town.
Yeah. If you go from like Jamestown and Adamantiaman, and then you leave that area, you head down towards Hans Mill.
Right.
There's a little town where a lot of those men actually came from, and it's a crazy little place. But literally, you go down the main street. This town has not really developed in 150 years.
Yeah,
the main street is still it's basically like dirt part of it, and some of the stores actually have the roofs have caved in because of the snowfall, and nobody's kept up with them. It's a pretty scary little place. But anyway, I'll try to get some things. Hey, speaking of that. we have with us, and I never get to have him actually come up and Mike, come here for a second. So Mike James is here with us, and he's got a little special connection here with Kay as well. He's always the guy behind the mixing and all this kind of stuff, and Nancy and so forth. But she's not here right now. So anyway, but Mike, actually, you guys have a relationship too.
We do.
We do. Kay was my boss, and he was a really good boss. He was.
He bossed you around a lot?
Is at the Great Salt Lake Council, but we
Of the Boy Scouts.
Boy Scouts, and it was the largest. People don't know this is the largest Boy Scout council in the world, membership-wise, and a lot of responsibility. And Kay was the guy that always, if there's an emergency, he'd go out in front on the TV, radio, and kind of talk about the Lost Scouts.
He was like the face of the Boy Scouts of America for Utah area.
That was scary for a while.
yeah, I imagine so.
You put 120,000 youth in the mountains, and you give them matches, and you give them knives, and don't hurt anybody.
More than anything else, an opportunity with the Endowment Art Tour is to share with the general public an opportunity to interface with Scouting on a local basis. This is a great chance for local councils to recognize individuals within that council that have been involved in leaving a financial legacy to that council, to be able to put them up in front of their peers, to recognize them, and to thank the general public for what they do. And this showpiece here tonight is really more of a thank you to the general public who's helped Scouting, an opportunity to come and see something very unique and very different that they'd have to go all the way to Dallas to actually see, brought to Salt Lake City as a gift to the general public's support of Scouting.
That was scary for a while.
yeah, I imagine so.
You put 120,000 youth in the mountains, and you give them matches, and you give them knives, and don't hurt anybody.
Yeah, don't burn anything down.
Yeah, you do that every year.
No, but it was a great job. I was marketing director there, and just wonderful, wonderful people. And in fact, David Archuleta was one of our Boy Scouts, there, right? And we had some great things we planned, but it was a lot of fun. And we, right after that, when I got married about 9 years ago to Nancy, those of you know, I wanted to go on a trip to Israel, and we were going to kind of film a documentary over there. And I remember, this is before I even met Nancy or dated, but we were going to room together while I film, and I said, Kay, I think I get in the feeling like I may be taking someone with me. And I know that seemed kind of presumptuous, and I thought he'd just say, well, too bad, but he actually believed me and worked it out, and sure enough, we were dating over the summer, we got engaged, we got married in September, and the tour left in December and Christmas, and Nancy, that's the one place that girl hasn't been, is Israel. Yeah. But it was just a remarkable experience. Yep. It was just great. But the most important thing is my testimony of what Rod does, and with Book of Mormon evidence in North America. Kay was responsible because he sat me down, and he was busy, and I was in his office. He said, Mike, just look at this. So he pushed his computer over, and I watched you and your testimony on YouTube, and I still remember the spirit that I felt. And sometimes when you feel those things early on, it's because you're going to have a connection. I had no idea that we'd be working together.
Years later,
couldn't get rid of me.
Crazy stuff, yeah.
But I really owe that to Kay, and he's been a great supporter of the Heartland, and
yeah, he has.
And just, but he's just a good guy in general. He's just a wonderful.
In fact, Kay was on the very first DVD set that we did.
Yep.
He is introducing the Joseph Smith portion of that.
I do remember.
I had 4 different people introduce different sections of that, and Kay was kind enough. And this is back in the time when I was getting a lot of attacks, and so he had to kind of
dodge the bullets.
Dodge some bullets. come out with that Rod Meldrum guy, whatever. It was kind of funny how that was turned, but it turned out. I'll never forget being in Kay's office there, and he has this like Leahona, and you have a set of plates there, that actual a whole bunch of plates. This is more of a fiberglass thing. But anyway, so
He has the real Leahona.
yeah, he's the real Leahona right there. And he also has been a collector of a lot of really cool documents and so forth. So we're going to talk about some of that here in a minute.
But I really do love both you and I love Kay, and thanks for
Great, Mike.
inviting me up. So appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Mike, for all your. I know you do a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, but every now and again you got to drag you out here in the front here. Anyway, back to this. So let's see. Last verse here in section 24 is.
Rod, can I say something about dusting the feet?
Oh yes.
For just a second. I think it's worth.
We got talking about dusting the feet.
Yeah.
And my mind immediately went to Mike.
Sorry about that, Mike. So I think Talmage has a really interesting take on this, and this is probably why we as elders didn't really dust our feet very often, if ever. Although it has been done in church history.
Breckenridge. That's what it is.
Breckenridge, that's right.
Breckenridge. That's where we kind of got stuck on that. It was Breckenridge.
That's
Missouri.
that dusty town that
Holy smokes.
looks like many people dusted their feet there.
Yeah.
There's not much.
Yeah, but even across the river from Nauvoo, I mean, basically you have some of the saints were welcomed into a couple of areas, and those places have prospered and done really well. And in fact, I remember you telling me about that, so maybe you can just kind of just.
For those of you that may go to Breckenridge, the draw to Breckenridge is that millstone.
Yeah.
Of course, one of the original Hans millstones is in cement right there in a little park that's there. Yeah. And the Missouri Mormon Frontier Foundation has put the names of those that were killed and identified all of those folks and told a little story about it. So it's kind of an interesting place if you can't get to Hans Mill.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of not getting to Hans Mill, so we were on a tour, and Kay goes, well, they just put new gravel down into Hans Mill, so maybe we can get a tour bus, because it's kind of in the bottom of this river valley, and it's kind of really mushy and kind of stuff, so you can't really get the great big, these huge tour buses, 70 feet long. And so Kay goes, I think we can get down in there now. But I guess you hadn't been down in there. So we drive that down in there, and it was a really nice road. I mean, it had gravel and so forth.
For a while.
Right up until it got to Hans Mill itself, and there was no place to turn a bus around.
No.
And we ended up, I was standing in the back of the bus for half an hour. Come back. We literally backed this entire tour coach for like about a mile and a half to get around bends and corners and everything to get back out of there.
Our itinerary had to be changed after that.
Yes, it did. But I tell you, the people who are on the tour, they
still remember that.
They got. In fact, BYU was there doing a bunch of Grand Penetration.
Yeah, they were.
Anyway, that was another fun little adventure that we had to go. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Anyway, Talmage says to ceremonially shake the dust from one's feet as a testimony against another was understood by the Jews to symbolize a cessation of fellowship and a renunciation of all responsibility for consequences that might follow. It became an ordinance of accusation and testimony by the Lord's instructions to his apostles, as cited in the New Testament. In this current dispensation, the Lord has similarly directed his authorized servants to so testify against those who willfully and maliciously oppose the truth when authoritatively presented. The responsibility of testifying before the Lord by this accusation, this accusing symbol, is so great that the means may be employed only under unusual and extreme conditions, as the Spirit of the Lord may dictate. And he says, interestingly enough, the Lord cautions those who forms this ordinance that it should not be done in the presence of those who are testifying against, lest thou provoke them, but in secret, and wash thy feet as a testimony against them in the day of judgment. And so, although this has been done, I think one would take real serious thought if you decide to do that, because you're going to have to testify relative to this individual, and who knows what his or her future might be, and are you in a position to really want to do something like this? Now, Samuel Smith, Joseph's younger brother, did do it to a tavern owner, and the tavern owner caught smallpox, and he and two of his children died shortly after this ordinance was performed. So it has been done, but it's kind of scary. And Talmage says if it's to be done, it's to be done with great caution. Yeah. But he calls it an ordinance, what I thought was really interesting.
These blessings and cursings kind of thing, though, like we mentioned about Breckenridge, but there's also been others as well.
Yeah.
The town across from Nauvoo there, and I'm trying to remember, was it not Quincy? It was on the west side there. But
yeah.
But this town welcomed the saints in as they were in their exodus out of Nauvoo, and they welcomed them in, and they took care of them and so forth. And the other town basically said, "We don't want you here. Just go away."
Oh yeah.
And that town has never grown.
Yeah.
And
it's across from Keokuk.
Yeah.
So it's right straight across from Keokuk. Yeah, and it's
just kind of north of Keokuk.
It's a little Breckenridge looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But these blessings and cursings, though, are kind of an interesting aspect, because also there's been other blessings and cursings that God has done over the course of the world history.
Yes.
And those kind of things, and you don't want to get on the wrong side of God, and that has to do with covenants and so forth as well.
Agreed.
But judgments of God basically are just, and I'm glad that I'm not the one that has to make those judgments.
Yes.
But I don't want to have to stand in front of the Lord and basically try to explain why
you dusted
my
what
feet
you did
off somebody.
Yeah. Agreed.
So anyway, all right. This is section 25.
Oh, on Emma.
And talk about Emma, because I want to really help you learn more about Emma through Kay's experiences and some of the things that he's done there with Emma and Joseph.
Well, we've got this picture behind you, Rod, of Emma. This is from Jane Arnold. She's a noted artist in the Vermont, New Hampshire area. And I really like this. I've seen some pictures of Emma that are a little dark, and I don't particularly care for them, but I do like what Jane did there with this particular picture.
Very nice.
When I talk a little bit about Emma, and this might be a little bit of a stretch, but bear with me if you would. So why Emma? So why Mary, the mother of the Savior? Mary is one of the few women that is talked about in our scriptures. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all reference Mary. The early Christian church gave Mary the name of Theotokos, meaning the bearer, or the mother of God. And so there's a lot of emphasis on not wanting to forget the things that Mary did and accomplished in her life. Although the scriptures don't give us don't give us that
details.
That detail. Yeah. As such, a little bit the same sort of situation with Emma. McConkie wrote, "Can we speak too highly of," I'm talking Mary, "whom the Lord blessed above all women? There was only one Christ and there was only one Mary. Each was noble and great in their premortal existence, and each was foreordained to the ministry he or she performed. We cannot think but what the Father would choose the greatest female spirit to be the mother of his Son." And so, if Joseph Smith was the greatest prophet of all, Hiram Smith said he knew everything the prophets knew from the beginning to the end. He had all their knowledge. If he's the greatest of the prophet, I think that perhaps one could make a case that Emma, in the pre-existence, perhaps was foreordained to be his wife.
Was commensurate with that.
Yes. Yeah. Now, if that's the case, suddenly that throws Emma into a whole different arena as far as I'm concerned. As you read Doctrine and Covenants section 25, you'll come to the reference that Emma is an elect lady.
Yeah, and verse 3.
Yeah, in verse 3. And that elect is highlightable, and if you click on elect, it takes you to 2 John 1:1. And 2 John 1:1 says, and I quote, "The elder to the elect lady and her children whom I love in truth." Well, the apostle speaking here identifies himself as the elder, both being older, but also being the one with authority. And this letter is written in tremendous amount of sincere love. In the first 6 verses, the truth and love are referenced 5 different times. And so you need to kind of remember that. Now, the word elect in Hebrew is vachor. Now, vachor actually translates to the chosen one, or chosen. And in the international version of the Bible, if you look at its translation of that particular word, it says chosen of God. Now, again, that puts Emma in a whole different arena.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not going to want to hit on Emma too often, too much, because, in fact, she probably was foreordained to do what she did, and she was chosen of God.
I like that, elect, the term elect. I mean, we just kind of went through an election, where basically people chose, had to make a choice.
It's much more than that.
But if it's with God and it's His choice, then that's a pretty amazing choice.
I was going to just reference a couple of things. If you were to walk in her shoes, and I'm a huge Emma fan. I love Emma and what she was able to do with Joseph during his lifetime. But 46 times the prophet was charged on some trumped-up accusation, and 45 times he was acquitted. Joseph lived in 7 states. None of them ever claimed him. He was driven from 3, imprisoned in 1, and martyred, of course, in another. And then this is kind of interesting. In the 1800s, the infant mortality rate was 50%. And the average lifespan of a person living during the time of Joseph and Emma was 38 and a half years old. And quite honestly, that's driven because of a lot of infant death. But nevertheless, 38 and a half years old is the average lifespan of a person living during this particular period.
Even adults, though. I mean, and women would die in childbirth quite regularly.
And Emma had 11 children, and she's only going to have 5 of them that are going to survive. Wow. So again, the trials she had...
More than half.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, only in one instance did Emma bear a child in a home she could actually call her own, and that would be David Hiram Smith, that was born after the prophet's martyrdom. And later in life, David, of course, is going to suffer mentally, and he's going to spend 27 years of his life in a mental institution in upstate Illinois. And so were her challenges above and beyond? I certainly believe they were. And she certainly is given, at least as far as I'm concerned, all the credit in the world for being able to overcome these challenges and be able to be the valiant, courageous woman that she really was. Of course, she was elected the first Relief Society president, and I don't want to spend an awful lot of time because we've got other things on this, but there is one thing I wanted to mention with regards to Emma and her love for her family. She had a vision.
I just can't even imagine burying
all those
child
kids
after child after child. I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, you go through all of that labor and all that discomfort and everything, and then you end up having the children, and just had to have them just die in your arms or in front of you and so forth. And some of them she bore and they lived for some period of time, and the twins and so forth. And just so enough to actually bond with them, and then they're taken from you.
Yeah. We had a plaque at the Joseph Smith Birthplace Memorial just as you come into the visitor center. It was on the wall. My wife did that particular portrait. I could never bring myself to read the plaque and the words on the plaque. My wife has a better constitution than I do, although she was brought to tears many times with it. But on that plaque was written the quote from Joseph Smith that is in our manual here, talks just a little bit, but in its entirety it reads, "What unspeakable delight and what transports of joy swelled my bosom when I took by the hand my beloved Emma, she that was my wife, even the wife of my youth and the choice of my heart. Many were the reverberations of my mind when I contemplated for a moment the scenes we had been called to pass through, the fatigues, the toils, the sorrows, the sufferings, the joys, and the consolations. Oh, what a commingling of thought filled my mind for the moment. Again she is here, even in the 7th trouble, undaunted, firm, unwavering, unchangeable, and affectionate Emma." Now, that's quite a thing to say about your wife.
Now, Joseph Smith obviously had a real affinity towards her, but apparently she must have had quite a thing for him too, because wasn't she paddled upriver a couple times in a canoe to go see Joseph? And,
she did.
Several miles.
Yes, she did.
Upriver to go see Joseph.
Yeah, and
so she was quite smitten with him too.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, they were a wonderful, and to elope literally, as opposed to a formal marriage, one has to be smitten quite a bit with one's partner. But I think in closing, I would just say that Emma was terrific, and certainly has an incredible glory that awaited her once she passed. And we can only say good things about Emma.
Yeah. I've often thought about the relationship between the Joseph Smith family and the Brigham Young family, and they didn't get along for too well. There was a lady that had a tour company that basically she was with the Brigham Young family, they kind of got the two of them back together again.
Yeah.
It was really nice to be able to have the two families kind of,
wonderful,
reconcile some of the differences and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, people have said, well, she didn't follow, Brigham Young back and so forth, which is true. And she did actually have a pretty hard life even after that with her next husband, who was a
Bitterman.
Yeah, Bitterman, who was not a really not a good guy, and actually not even faithful to her and so forth. But yet she would help to raise one of his illegitimate kids, basically.
Yep.
She was that kind of a woman.
Her anchor there was Lucy.
Yeah.
Lucy Mack, who stayed also. Wanted to go west, but could see that Emma needed some support.
Yeah.
So it's good to have a mother-in-law that was there to help and support.
Yeah, I'm sure Emma probably felt to some extent abandoned by as Brigham and everybody else. All the other men and everybody left Nauvoo kind of open, and she's like, okay, now what do we do?
Exactly.
But I think that she had suffered maybe enough. Maybe the Lord said, you know what? That's enough.
There comes a point.
It is enough. Yeah. I also wanted to bring up in the DNA realm. It's kind of an interesting thing when people have talked about plural marriage and so forth, and Emma was not a real fan of that, and of course Joseph wasn't really either.
Very, very true.
But a lot of people there's been a lot of misunderstanding about these plural marriages and so forth. And I think a lot of it comes down to, in fact, I know a lot of it comes down to the lack of understanding by the world of the difference between a sealing and a wedding or a marriage.
Yeah.
And we in the church understand there's a difference, because sometimes we have to be married first and then we're sealed later, and we're all sealed to our parents and so forth. And there was lots of sealings that were done. I don't know if you wanted to talk about some of that a little bit, but I know that there was research that was done by Sorensen Molecular Research Foundation. They took the top 25 people who had some kind of a claim historically or whatever of descendancy from Joseph,
right,
through someone other than Emma.
Right.
And the Sorensen Molecular Research Foundation, we know quite a bit about what Joseph and Hiram's DNA was, because they would have shared similar genetics, basically. He and Hiram has descendants that we can actually test and so forth. So the bottom line is that they found out that out of all of the 25 claims to descendancy from Joseph Smith outside of Emma and her and their children that they had together, none of them worked out genetically. They said that the probabilities of Joseph having fathered children outside of his marriage with Emma is like not there. There's no DNA evidence basically to suggest that Joseph Smith ever fathered any children.
Right. Despite the claims. And so forth. And I find that's kind of an interesting aspect as well. It is.
The law of plural marriage is something that the Lord has condoned at different times in history, but generally speaking, not. And I know it was a hard thing for Joseph, and I don't know if you had any comments about Emma's thoughts about this or whatever, but
Emma fluctuated in her thinking about that. We know that she stood in as a witness on at least 2 of the plural marriages that Joseph would be involved in. She was adamantly against it most of the time, however, and had a hard time with it. I don't fault Emma for much of anything, but to have continually gone literally to the deathbed claiming that this was a Brigham Young initiated thing and Joseph had nothing to do with it was a stumbling block for her children, and would be one of the major issues involving our belief and what today is the Community of Christ Church.
Right.
And that kind of
her son Joseph Smith III, basically.
Yes, exactly. And that gets traced back to Emma's discomfort and dislike for this concept of plural marriage.
I think in general most women have it, and a lot of men.
Sure. Yes.
It's more of a trial, I think, is what it made people look at that.
Absolutely.
But I just find it interesting, though, that it appears that if Joseph Smith did have these, we know that many of these marriages, these sealings took place.
Yes.
I would hesitate to call them a marriage necessarily.
Yes.
because there's no evidence that there was any consummation of the marriages.
Correct.
Or that kind of thing, and there was a lot of people who were sealed and wanted to be sealed to Joseph Smith in the same kind of fashion, I think, as I want to be sealed with my family, my parents, and so forth. But if my parents were like not awesome, I mean, maybe I'd want to be sealed to someone else. I don't know how that all works on the other side.
Yeah.
But I think that these were sealings and not marriages, and that there was no these claims of Joseph Smith being sex crazed pedophile and so forth, and all these kind of things are just absolutely so ridiculous, especially when you realize that back in those days, I have ancestors of my own that married at 14 and 15 years old.
Yes.
And that was kind of the norm. In fact, you got to be about 18, 19 years old, you're kind of considered an old maid if you're a woman, and a menace to society if you're a man back in those days. So those were different times, and we have a tendency to place our viewpoints and based on our culture on other people and other times and other cultures, and then say, well, that's a pedophile because they're less than 16 years old. Well, that's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
We just want to address a couple of these issues that come up.
Yeah,
the people,
Yeah, that the whole issue of polygamy and the saints in the 1840s is a really interesting concept. My research on that, though, and this is a teaser for perhaps another time, is that polygamy saved the church. The interweaving of families together, the network and the fabric that was created after the death of Joseph, kept the quorum of 12 apostles together and saved the church. You had 8 to 10 different fractured groups at Joseph's death that tried to pull the church apart.
Yeah.
But that polygamy issue, although they were not practicing it, and the 12 were, kept that group together to form the basis of
the nucleus of the church. I think the first 8 presidents of the church actually were results of these polygamous marriages. And
so there's a lot more to this subject than just to dislike that.
I'll never forget Mary Ellen Elgren. By the way, Mary Ellen, if you're watching this, here's a shout out to you. But she had Klaus and Shields tour, which is the very first tour that we ever did, and but she was the president of the Brigham Young Family Foundation.
Oh yeah.
And just to give you an idea of how that worked, Joseph Smith has practically no descendants. I mean, they barely kept going, just barely. And after Joseph Smith III, and it didn't take very long before they didn't have any more descendants. And so they, this descendancy by patriarchal descent basically kind of ended with the Community of Christ, church. But the bottom line is that they said, in contrast to that, Brigham Young had, by the third generation, he had over 1,000 descendants. And now there's tens of thousands of people who literally have descendancy from Brigham Young and one of his many wives. So there was, it actually did grow the church dramatically.
It did what the scripture said it would do.
Yes.
But there's quite a bit more to that, especially initially in keeping things together so they wouldn't fracture apart like so much else did at the death of Joseph.
Yeah, it created kind of a net.
It did.
Like almost a safety net for the church.
And it was a final test of that 12 to determine their loyalty. There's a lot to polygamy that is really misunderstood, that is really refreshing and rewarding when you understand the concept in its entirety, and you're grateful that it happened.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so now I wanted to just touch bases real quick on verse 4. In section 25, it says, "Murmur not because of the things which thou hast not seen, for they are withheld from thee and from the world, which is wisdom in me in a time to come." What was it that Emma didn't see? I mean, she saw all these images, these hardships and deaths of kids and the persecution of her husband and the persecution of the saints and so forth. But he says, don't murmur because of the things you didn't see.
All right.
So what is it that she didn't see?
Well, to the best of our knowledge, she did not see the golden plates. She may have thumbed them a time or two.
Yes, but we actually have her account of that.
Right.
She said they wrestled.
Yes, like metal.
Like metal. They made a metallic rustle when she would move them around from place to place and cleaning and stuff.
Yes. So that had to be probably a little discouraging to her, I would imagine.
Yeah, because Mary Whitmer got to see
I know.
Yeah, so like that's kind of a slap in the face. I mean, but well, being the elect lady, though, she may not have needed to see that to still have the faith.
Right.
And that might have been
right.
Maybe the Lord knew that she didn't need to see the place to know. I mean, she hefted them.
Right.
She handled it. She
Right.
knew they were there.
Right.
She just didn't get to see it with her eye.
Right.
Straight through.
Very much. Very true. Very true.
Is there anything else that you think that maybe she was murmuring about that she did not see?
The plates come to mind.
So that's the one.
That's the main.
Okay, that's the one thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so last couple of things here. Let's skip over to verse 11. And it says, "And it shall be given thee also, Emma, to make a selection of sacred hymns, as it shall be given thee, which is pleasing unto me, to be had in my church."
Yes.
And now, for me, music has played a big part of my life. I mean,
Yes.
I grew up in the rock and roll era, basically, and I listened to that when on my mission. And my mom always was listening to, Sounds for Sunday kind of thing up in
Sure.
Cache Valley, Utah. They had the radio station up there, and I always had these Sounds for Sunday, and I actually really did enjoy them, although I probably would never let my mom know that. But I listened to plenty of rock and roll kind of stuff. But but on my mission and so forth, I started over in Italy, as you know, and and there's a lot of classical, and I kind of got more into classical stuff, and I really enjoy that. There's a calming effect that there's just
Very good.
the opposite of the rock and roll thing, and but hymns, though, on the other hand, can be so powerful and so moving, and the song of the heart, as the Lord says, basically is a
prayer.
It's a prayer unto me, unto the Lord. Which is one of the things I find hard with this whole COVID lockdown stuff, is that not being able to really sing or singing through the mass.
Yeah, it just doesn't cut it, does it? I noticed that Sunday.
I don't know how much. I mean, I guess the Lord knows the song of the heart, though,
Yes.
too. So I guess it doesn't matter whether you sing out loud, but I like the singing out loud part.
Yeah.
But anyway, so any background, any information about this little book?
1835 edition. Emma was asked to put this together, and she did. And she selected 90 hymns. A fellow who does not get enough credit is William Wine Phelps. W.W. Phelps was responsible for the publication and the fine-tuning of what Emma thought ought to go into this. Yeah. And so the 90...
She kind of was the idea person.
Right. And he's the
rubber hit
mechanics.
the road. Okay,
That's exactly right. And although it says in the front of it it's an 1835 edition, it didn't come out really till the spring of 1836. But it's just a pocket size, so it could go just like this, as well as like the Book of Mormon eventually was.
Now you have your own copy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rod. But in 1840, with the missionaries going overseas, Brigham Young, Heber C. Kimball, and everybody else, she was asked to heft this up a bit, see if you can't enhance this a bit. And so I brought an 18...
So what did you got for us here, Kay?
I've got an 1841
Oh, look at this.
copy of her hymnal here, and it's opened up to the Spirit of God like a fire is burning. And Mike, you'll have to take a picture and please put this on if you would. And it has, instead of 90 songs...
So the Spirit of God like a fire was burning was originally written for the Kirtland Temple.
Correct.
Dedication.
Yes, and by 1840 we have it now as a song, and there's 304 different hymns now. So the book is about twice this thick, still relatively small, as you can see, but we needed some additional kinds of songs that would be appropriate for our English friends over the waters. And so we have a book that has significantly more hymns in it. Again, it's still in the word format, simple word format.
There's no music or there's no scales or anything like that going on there.
What Brother Phelps did, though, is he took Emma's songs, and as well as these songs, and he tried to lump them together in different types, restoration songs, celestial kingdom songs, songs that could be some temple songs, and just kind of bunch them like that. It was our first effort by him to try and put songs in some fashion.
Who was that? That was
W. Phelps, yeah. And so, so the hymnals became a huge part, and singing as you love so much and do is a huge part of church services today.
Well, I just love it. In fact, there was one particular one that caught our attention. Actually, it was Betty Red Ant LaFontaine from Florida. We were in we were in Arizona actually, down by Bisbee or not Bisbee. It was anyway. It doesn't matter where it was. It was southern Arizona.
Southern Arizona.
And with Paul and Sue Karchner, and by the way, Paul and Sue. Hi there. They are. I think they're still the presidents of the Gila River Temple. Okay. Down there now. But anyway, we were staying with them, and we had an early morning kind of a devotional on a Sunday morning at their home, and Betty was telling us about this. If you've been to one of our conferences, or if you've heard Betty Red Ant LaFontaine, she is a Navajo. She's Native American, full-blood Native American, and. Anyway, but she was going through this little hymnal. Now, they didn't have music, so how do you know what tune that works?
And if you were not familiar with the English tune, you're in trouble.
Yeah. But it turns out, so she was reading this. She found this one. She called it the Red Man Song, and in fact. She got her husband, and Mike, shout out to you, and anyway, she was reading it to him, and he says, well, it sounds like that could be the music to, that would go kind of well with the music to, if you could write a collab.
Oh, wow.
And
one of my favorites.
And she started to sing that, and it actually worked out beautifully.
Oh, wow.
And of course, we know that if you could write a collab was written, but she had done some other songs, and apparently they would use some of the same music,
melody,
and they would put different words to it.
Absolutely.
But this is called the Red Man Song.
Hey, Rod, you could hide a collab.
Oh, if you could hide? What did I say? Hide?
You said bye, didn't you?
I thought you said hi.
I thought I said hi.
I'm sorry. Okay, keep going. I just don't want to.
Would you please delete that?
Okay, so anyway, this song is really, especially as it relates to the Book of Mormon information, and so. I would sing it to you right now, but actually I think it would be better. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this is from one of our conferences that we had up at the Davis County Convention Center a couple of years ago, and it's Betty Red Ant LaFontaine. But the song, the first two verses are basically about we as of European descent Latter-day Saints. And we're asking this question. It starts off, it says, "Oh, stop and tell me, Red Man, who are ye? Why you roam? And how you get your living? Have you no God, no home? With stature straight and portly, and decked in native pride, with feathers, paints, and brooches, he willingly replied." And so this is what, so we actually sang this song. I did the first part, I think, if I remember, and then Betty Red Ant sang the last part, and it's been really fun. We actually had a chance to sing this. Betty actually sang the song for Marie Osmond, which is kind of a switch, Yeah. People don't usually sing to her; she sings to them. But so a shout out to Marie, if you're there. And that actually gave Marie a really beautiful Native American drum, the elk-hide drum and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. So enjoy the Red Man Song by Betty Red Ant LaFontaine.
Very good.
I once was pleasant from when Jacob for me prayed, but oh, how blessings vanish when man from God has strayed. Before your nation knew us some thousand moons ago,
to also point out a couple other things, because you mentioned you have one of these, and I'm just highly impressed by that. Because this is the Book of Commandments, which is the rarest of all church history books.
1833 edition of the Book of Commandments, as opposed to the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you explain how Mary Elizabeth Rollins and so forth, and her role, and why this book is such a important piece of our history?
This book came about because of the salvaging of a handful of papers by the Rollins girls, as W.W. Phelps and his printing establishment were being destroyed, literally, by a mob.
In Independence.
There in Independence, Missouri. That's exactly correct. And were put together, so it was the predecessor. And I guess...
So it's so cool to go with Kay on these tours, because he'll go right up in this building here. That's where they were throwing the type out.
You
and
remember
so forth.
that?
Yeah. Oh, how can I forget? And then right over there was the cornfield that they were going. And church history and Book of Mormon history just comes alive when you are with people who know.
Well, when you go to
this.
You can say all you want and try and glean as much spirit as you can, but to go to the site, stand on the corner where Edward Partridge was tarred and feathered in Independence, all of a sudden it makes it a little more real.
There's even a marker.
There is.
Even to this day, right there.
Missouri Mormon Frontier Foundation have marked that spot. That's correct. So I would encourage people to try to make some journeys and some trips to these sites. They'll become much, much more meaningful in the long run.
So this is the predecessor. Basically, the Book of Commandments is the predecessor to what we're studying this year, which is the Doctrine and Covenants. So, in fact, we have a good friend of ours, Mark Burris. He had they had to close it, though, but it was the bookstore out there in Palmyra.
Yes.
The Latter-day Harvest bookstore out there. He had a bunch of these actually put together and printed up. They're basically the same shape, size, and even the same fonts as the originals here. This is the Book of Commandments. If you want to see the original pages from the Book of Commandments here, it's really pretty fascinating here. And then he also had this really nice leather-bound original edition of the Book of Mormon here. And again, you can see it even has the same, the fonts and so forth, using the same fonts and so forth. If you go to the website on the bookstore, we actually have each of these are available.
Very good.
The hymnal, usually right here, collection of sacred hymns of the church. It's normally $20, and then this $22 for the Book of Commandments, and then the Book of Mormon is $30. But we have a special package thing where you get all three of them. And if you go onto the bookstore and check it out, you can get all three of them for a really special.
That's great.
Thing. So
and they're very nicely done.
Yeah. These are beautiful, well done books. So have a little gold embossing and everything, just like they did back in the day there. So, Song of the Heart. So the verse 12 just talks about that Song of the Heart. The righteous is a prayer unto me, and that shall be answered with a blessing upon their heads. Brothers and sisters, if you want blessings,
sing.
Even
if you have a mask on, sing.
Even if you can't sing. There you go. Okay. So, Kay, go ahead. Do you have a couple of closing things that you'd like to share with us?
I just appreciate you inviting me to come and be a part of this. It's always great to come and talk about church history and blend it with your knowledge of all of the gospel principles and the scriptures. It's just great to melt the two together, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk a little bit about Emma and some of these other things.
You got a couple other things here to share with everybody?
I was given a recognition piece. This is a foundation stone from the Harmony, Pennsylvania home of Joseph and Emma, where a good portion, 90+% of the Book of Mormon was translated. When the church restored this a few years back, had an opportunity to, my background is in archaeology, and that's the stones and that's the dirt. And knowing that, I was able to receive a piece of the original foundation of that particular home. In fact, I have a number of stones I'm kind of a collector of stones, but it's
I'm kind of a Rock and Miller collector myself too. So.
There you go. So it's kind of fun to have that and some of these other books and scriptures.
And then you want to just
these little porcelains of Joseph and Emma I thought were very appropriate. And I've got a number of these. If you join Rod or I on a tour to Israel, you'll get the same thing in olive wood. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
You go all the way to Israel, and you can find in some particular little olive wood shops.
What's his name's Bazaar? What's it called?
Jimmy's
Bazaar. Yes,
you
that's
can
right.
find Joseph and Emma in olive wood. So,
or you can get what I did, which is the statue of Moroni.
There you go. There you go.
That's something you don't see.
That's a nice piece, too.
That's a pretty cool piece.
Yeah, that's a
really cool piece. Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. So I just appreciate the invitation to be with you, Rod. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kay, and thank you for all your efforts and for following your gifts to pursue the life and times of the prophet Joseph Smith. What an amazing life that is as you study his prophet.
The Book of Mormon has never been the same since you and I started talking.
That's right.
And the thousands of people who are now affected by what you've done is just a huge credit to you and your accomplishments.
Well, if you'd like to learn more, basically, I want to encourage you. Kay was on several of our podcasts last year on the Book of Mormon. Mm-hmm. And so you can go back and watch those, and encourage other people as they read the Book of Mormon to go back and watch the podcast from last year. Also, he's spoken at several of our conference events. So if you go to Book of Mormon Evidence streaming, if you're one of the subscribing members of the Book of Mormon Evidence website, you can see more of Kay's amazing research on other areas of expertise.
Well, I might mention that Mike, who we introduced here, Mike has put together so far 9 podcasts that we're doing in conjunction with what you're doing as you specifically go through each and every lesson. They're not tailored to each and every lesson. It's a general overview of the history of the life of Joseph Smith. Yeah. By the time we get finished, there'll probably be 25 podcasts, and we're up to 10. So they're likewise at Come Follow Me 2021.
Well, you had a DVD set called Following the Footsteps of Joseph, which was just phenomenal. I loved those.
Yeah.
And it was great to go to see some of those, but those are not available anymore.
They're not. Okay. COVID has put businesses out of sync, and those are not available. So they're now collector's items.
So if you have one, hang on to that one.
There you go.
There you go. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this week. I hope this was enjoyable. I hope you have a little renewed appreciation for the life and times of the prophet Joseph Smith, and specifically his beautiful, wonderful wife, Emma.
There you go.
We love her and all the sacrifices that she made for the restoration.
Certainly.
Thank you, everybody. So join us next week. We're going to have we have an awesome podcast coming up involving the armor of God.
Ooh.
And we're going to bring a guy who knows about armor. So we're going to talk a little bit with Darren Southam. So we'll be looking for that next week.
Very good.
With the Reign of Judges, he's got some nice things to say, some things going on there next week. So
sounds great.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you.
We're also gearing up for the next Book of Mormon Virtual Expo. Go to bookofmormonevidence.org for more information.
Okay, delete that part out. No. Okay. If you can hide a collab.
There you go.
Okay.